Hi and welcome to another episode of the Page One Podcast. I'm Marco.
I'm Derek.
And thanks again for tuning in to the Page One Podcast, where we like to speak to authors of all kinds about their writing careers, how they got their break in the industry, and really try and get as many hints and tips about their writing as possible.
Absolutely. Primarily for ourselves, but
yeah,
we're happy to share them.
That's really why we started it, but we don't tell them that. I hope you've had a good week since the last episode. If this is your first episode, please do have a look at all of the other episodes that we've got up there. We've got some chats with some great authors.
Yeah.
David Baldacci, Andy McNabb, M.R. Carey, Tim Levin, Helen Fitzgerald, many.
A real mix.
Yeah, a real mix across various industries. But they've all got really good tips, I think, about how to write.
And they've all got different stories about how they got into the industry.
Yeah.
Some folk had it very easy, first agent or whatever.
Yeah.
And some folk had struggled for a long time.
Yeah.
It's nice knowing you're not alone out there.
Exactly. Who's on this week though, Tarek?
This week we are chatting with Claire Askew, who is an Edinburgh-based poet and novelist whose debut novel, All the Hidden Truths, was a very successful first book. It won the 2016 Lucy Cavendish Fiction Prize and recently the
William McIlvanney Debut Novel Prize at the Bloody Scotland Crime Festival, which she was very surprised to receive.
Because it came two years after the book had been out.
Yeah, it was sometime after it had been published, but it is a great book actually, and we chat with Claire a lot about the book, so I won't say too much about it now, but it's not what I would class as your typical crime novel.
Yes.
You find out what the crime is and who did it at the very, very start of the book, and it's more about the fallout and how you deal with grief and all of that sort of thing.
It's a nice change.
And it's written in a really interesting way as well, but we discuss all this with Claire, so I don't want to get into it too much just now.
Let's just say those who are fond of writing Wikipedia entries are in for a treat.
Yeah. And we also discuss her latest book, which is the second book in the D.I. Birch series, What You Pay For. And we also have an exciting competition to win a copy of What You Pay For.
Signed copy.
Signed copy.
At that.
Exactly.
By Claire, not by us.
Yeah, not by us. That wouldn't be very good. And we'll tell you how to enter that competition at the end of the podcast. But enough from us just now. We'll get straight into the podcast and we'll speak to you later.
See you then.
Did you always want to be a writer growing up? Did you always love reading?
Yeah, I did. I had a very brief period when I was about 6 where I wanted to be a vet.
Right. Okay.
But otherwise, it was writer from the beginning. My dad is really into words and he's always been like a technical writer. He works in PR and communications. And I think he always sort of instilled in me and my little brother like a love of the sound of words. And he used to recite very strange poetry to us. Like instead of a bedtime story, I would get like Edward Lear or Jabberwocky or that kind of thing. So from, for as long as I can remember, I was always really into words and stories and things. And then it just kind of grew from there. I was very lucky when I was in high school to have very encouraging English teachers and, came to University of Edinburgh to do English Lit. And I've just sort of had a very booky life. So it just has, there was never a conscious decision to go into the world of words. I've just always lived in the world of words.
Lived there, but when did you have that first, putting your writing out there, which is always a big step for a lot of people. When did you first do that? Was that at uni or was that?
Yeah, it was. I think it was about 2004 when I went and started my English Lit degree, and I first met other people who wrote stories and poems and things, and I had been completely alone in my high school and thought I was this complete weirdo who had a very strange hobby. And then I met other people and found that there were other writers out there. So I very quickly kind of leapt into all of that. And I was a poet for a long time before I even thought about writing novels. So started sending poetry out to magazines and things in the sort of mid-2000s. And then in about 2014 started to write the first novel. And there were a lot of things that sort of came together to make that the time for the novel. The idea for All the Hidden Truths, what became All the Hidden Truths, had been sort of kicking around in my head for years before that. I was working at a further education college, and there was one day that we had a bit of a scare.
Right.
And we got an email from a student who said she was going to bring an air rifle to class.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, we were all a bit, and it was my class she was coming to, and we were all a bit like, what do we do about that? It was kind of sort of quite a friendly email. It wasn't threatening. She's just like, oh, I'm going to bring my air rifle in and show everybody. And we were kind of like, God, we are not prepared for this.
So was it something saying I'm going to shoot people with it, or was it like a...
No, it was kind of, I think she was a strange woman, but I think she saw it as sort of like I've got this thing that's like a show and tell type thing. And we realised, you know, nothing terrible happened and it was all fine, but we realised that we didn't have anything in place for, you know, if she just showed up with this thing.
Yeah.
We had no procedure for what we would do, how we would protect the students, you know. And I think it was that incident that it got me thinking, what would I do? What would anybody do? What, you know. And then that kind of started a train of thought that connected into all sorts of other trains of thought, and the idea just kind of, it was like a rolling snowball. It just got bigger and bigger, and then wouldn't leave me alone.
No, that's what happens, I think, with the best ideas. Yeah, you have to get it down. I mean, it is, and that, just for anyone that's not read the book, do you want to give a brief summary of what it's about? So, All the Hidden Truths is about a mass shooting at a fictional further education college in Edinburgh, and it's a beautiful day in May, and a young man called Ryan Summers walks into his further education college and shoots dead 13 of his female classmates and then himself. And the book actually follows sort of 6 weeks in the aftermath of this event from the point of view of 3 women who are trying to come to terms with what's happened. And one of them is Ryan Summers' mother, Moira. One of them is the mother of the first victim, Ishbel, and the third is DI, Helen Birch, who has just been promoted, and this is the first case that lands on her desk. Lucky her. I mean, it is an unusual topic for a UK crime novel to tackle, really. You know, obviously in America it's sadly it's a much more common thing. Why did you want to, I mean, was it just this thing that happened in your earlier life that sort of caused you to go down that path?
Well, it kind of, one of the like layers of snow that this snowball gathered as it rolled down the mountain was it kind of connected into my thoughts about Dunblane, which had also been sort of rattling around in my head for a while. Because I was 10 when that happened, and I was in a little primary school on the Scottish borders, you know, not a million miles away. And I remembered very vividly my school, which had, you know, 100 pupils, going from being the kind of place that parents just wandered in and out, and it was very friendly and it was all very chilled, to overnight having like security doors and CCTV and all this kind of thing. And that was kind of a big like loss of innocence moment for a lot of us in Scotland, I think, who were young people in that era, because you suddenly realise that your safe places are not as safe as you think they are. And that sort of kept coming to me as I was watching news reports about these shootings that were happening in America. And hearing pundits say, like, well, this doesn't happen here, it's not a problem that we have to deal with. And kind of thinking, well, actually, we did have to deal with it once it did happen here. And I think it's a bit complacent to sort of not even consider it. I think, you know, when I was working in further education, I worked a lot with young men who'd been kind of rightly or wrongly labelled as like particularly challenging. And I could absolutely see how these often quite like angry, disenfranchised young men, if the right set of circumstances came along, I could completely understand how they could get into a position where they did something horrendous, you know. So it was sort of worry about that and annoyance at how the discussion was playing out in the media, and this thing that had happened with the girl with the air rifle. It all kind of came together, And I thought, I can see this happening. I think other people could see it happening. So I thought the book was plausible enough.
Yeah, totally.
And I think as so much of the British crime scene is quite, it's kind of has a lot of tropes that it follows. And I felt this was a nice spin on what a normal crime novel is here. It deals, probably because it deals with a matter that you don't really tend to get here because of, as we've said. I thought that was quite good, and I really liked the way you used social media and stuff. You used there's a lot of excerpts in the book from Wikipedia, comments, tweets, etc. And I felt you totally captured the reality of what people do tend to, of how these things look online, the comments that people make, and I take it you did a lot of research into stuff like false flag attacks, trolling, incels, all that kind of murky world, which is just nuts.
Yeah.
That came across really well with it.
Yeah, that was it was fascinating, but also depressing to research. To go on these like conspiracy theory websites and see the sorts of things that people really believe, like, Sandy Hook and all these kind of shootings were all faked by the government to try and bring about gun control, and you just think, oh, that's such a horrendous, that has horrendous implications for the survivors and the families, just horrendous. But I did get quite geeky about the Wikipedia and stuff. I'm so fascinated. But it just looks like the
formatting of it just looks. You obviously nailed that look of it. Perfect.
Well, they actually had to kind of walk me back a little bit from my obsessive Wikipedia stuff, because if you look through the Wikipedia pages in the book, there are the little numbers in square brackets that direct you to links, like Wikipedia has. And I had actually created at the very bottom of the Wikipedia page, you've got like the index of all those references. Stuff, I had created that, and I wanted that in the back of the book. And they were a bit like, but these are made up links, they don't go anywhere. Like, this doesn't need to be in there. But I said, but it's the end of the Wikipedia, and it brings it full circle. So I got very, very into that, I have to say. But Wikipedia is this fascinating place because it's
it's a rabbit hole.
Well, it's where we all go, isn't it, to kind of look for, I wonder how that happened, or I wonder what the timeline was for this incident or whatever. And yet we also, I've been a teacher for a lot of years. We tell students like never quote Wikipedia because it's not trustworthy. So we kind of treat it as an authority, and yet we also don't know if it is ever telling us the truth, So I got very kind of interested in that. Maybe a bit too interested.
No, but it was it was quite a unique thing to have all these different sort of breaks in the story for that, and I thought that really helped. I think it really helped push the story on. Yeah,
it's all quite good for like time jumps, isn't it? For moving forward in 6 weeks or whatever, or 3 weeks gone by, and you get a summary of what's happened in that time. Because I always struggle with trying to work out what's the best way to move a chunk of time forward in a story. And I know you've used that before, that kind of newspaper.
Yeah, I used newspaper articles.
Which is a good way of doing it, I think.
And it's, just from a plotting point of view, there are things you want to get across that have happened that you don't really want to have to write an entire scene of it happening, So having that reported to you in a newspaper article is quite a handy, like a cheat, really.
Well, it sort of fixes the sort of, here's a person going to give a lot of exposition. Instead of that, you've got that as an option, which is quite a good technique, I thought. And also, it's an unusual novel, or an unusual crime novel, in the sense that it's not a whodunit, because you find that out immediately. But it's more dealing with the aftermath of it all and about how it's affected all these different people, which, I think it was really good. And it, of course, went on to win the McIlvanney Prize, Debut Prize at Bloody Scotland. How did that feel?
Absolutely gobsmacking. I mean, it was really interesting because the book had been out for more than a year by the time it was shortlisted for that. So I'd kind of, the second one, What You Pay For, was out. I'd kind of moved on in my head to, promoting What You Pay For and talking about What You Pay For, and I'd sort of slightly put All the Hidden Truths on a shelf in my mind. So it was really nice to then have it recognised in that way. And it's the first time they've ever done a McIlvanney Debut Prize. So it was amazing to be the sort of inaugural recipient. It was great. And I was on such a good shortlist as well, with some really, really great books. I'm chuffed. I'm still kind of getting my head around it, to be honest. It's amazing.
We actually spoke. We had Craig Robertson on the on the podcast, so he was talking about it as well. So I think everyone was impressed by it clearly. And when you were getting all the Hidden Truths published, was it what was the route to publishing, if you like? Getting an agent? Did you have rejections, and how did you go down that path?
It had a really funny route to publication, in that it was basically I had like this massive attack of hubris, and it was a complete mess. I got to 50,000 words, it wasn't finished, and it was a complete mess, and I knew it was a complete mess. And I thought, well, what better to do than enter it into a competition in this horrendous state. Someone sent me a link to the Lucy Cavendish Fiction Prize, which is one of the few novel prizes that will take works in progress. And I thought, well, the first 10,000 words isn't that bad. The rest of it's dire, but like the first 10,000 words is all right. So I sent it off to this competition and was absolutely gobsmacked when it won. And as a result of it winning this prize, it was immediately agented by one of the judges.
Right.
And she and I worked on it for about 9 months, and it went through about 9 drafts, in which she was a saint. She managed to help me untangle this massive knot of a novel and get it into much better shape. But she and I we came to an impasse, basically, about the ending. Because I don't want to spoil the book, but it basically doesn't kind of give you a nice, cosy feeling when you put it down. You don't get to walk away and think like, all right, I can stop thinking about this novel now. I sort of wanted it to bother people.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't have a tidy ending. And she kept saying to me, look, if you just do like a twist and reveal, like a classic crime novel, it's going to be much more commercial. People will like it much better. It's going to do better. And I was going, well, but that's not what I want to do. And we just got to the point where she was saying, well, I'm not going to send it out unless you do this. And I was going, well, I'm not doing it. So in the end, we very amicably parted ways, which was quite terrifying. That, it was my decision, but it was still quite a terrifying thing.
Yeah, you're out there again. Although I suppose now you do have at least a book that's been massively improved.
And I, to be honest, I thought I was going to put it in a drawer and write another one. And then, fortunately, my friend Helen Sedgwick, who is about to become a crime novelist, she's been a literary novelist up till now, but she's about to release her first crime novel. She came along and was like, for goodness sake, you have to at least send it out to one more person. Only one person has seen it. And she was very forthright with me. And fortunately, I listened. And it went out again, and it's now agented. It was agented again, and then it went out on submission and found its home. So, but it was a long period of like nearly a year where it was in this limbo state of being edited, but not by an editor. It was.
Was it hard finding your second agent, or was it easier because you'd had because you could name someone before and you'd had this work and stuff? Was that a bit of a helping hand, or was it still hard?
Kath, my agent now, was chuffed because obviously I brought her this book that had gone through 9 rounds of edits, so she was like, fantastic, So she was really pleased. It didn't need anything much doing to it, and it was able to just go out the door, which I think was I sense that doesn't happen for her very often.
That's quite rare.
So she was quite pleased. So it did all happen quite quickly. Once Helen persuaded me to get it out there again. But, so I've been very fortunate in a lot of ways.
Do you think entering competitions is that something you would encourage aspiring writers or people that are writing to do, or does it serve to have it looked at by someone professional before you're doing that sort of thing?
It's a tricky one. I think the Lucy Cavendish Prize is great because there's no entry fee. That's a big thing. And I think if you get too much into sending out to competitions, you can probably bankrupt yourself. Some of them have massive entry fees. So I would never say to anyone that you should shell out loads of money. This is a route to go down. But I think if they're free to enter or cheap to enter, you have a punt. Why not? Why not? Because that was absolutely what I felt I was doing. I thought, I might as well, I have nothing to lose here, but I had no expectations whatsoever. And it somehow came off. So, I would say have a bash. if you're in a position to have
was
a
it, I take it what you sent in wasn't like first draft?
No. So the first 10,000 words had, because I mean, I wasn't sure if I had it in me to write a novel, to be honest, because I'd been a poet for so long, and I was like, I genuinely don't know if I have the attention span for this. And I'd kind of tried to write longer things before, and I'd always got to about 10,000 words and then just run out of steam. So I spent quite a long time having this 10,000 words and then going back over it and polishing it, you know, and then eventually started to write the rest. But it did mean that the first bit was in fairly good shape.
So how did you get past that issue of, was it, you know, I need to write more than the first 10,000 words? Did you have like a kind of structure that was saying every day I'm going to sit down and just going to force myself to write some more words? Or...
Well, I think I'd sort of got into a bit of a rhythm with writing a big thing, because before I wrote this novel, I did a PhD in creative writing, and I was working full time at the same time, which was madness. My biggest piece of advice to anybody is don't do that. So I'd got into this rhythm of like working in the week and then writing on the weekends for the PhD, and I think I just sort of missed the PhD. So I was spending my Saturday afternoons like in the spare room, just kind of messing around with this novel. That was the sort of terms that I used. I was very kind of secretive and reticent to talk about it. Like, it's just this thing that I'm sort of messing around with, and it's nothing, you know. Yeah. And, you know, I wouldn't like to hear another writer talking about their work like that. But I do think it helped that I never spoke about it as a serious thing. And I was able to feel like, I'm just messing around. It doesn't matter if it comes to anything. Yeah. You know, that
Keep
helped.
The pressure off a bit.
Yeah. And then it got to, you know, it gets to the point where if you've got 50,000 words, you're like, well, I've spent a lot of time on this. I kind of have to finish it. So I feel like now, because I've now written another 2, the third one is sort of in production now. Okay. I now know that I hit a wall at about 30,000 words, because it's a novelty up until then. You're like, that's a fantastic idea, and I'm so enjoying it, and I love these characters, and then it's kind of like, there's so much more to go. After 30,000 words, am I only here? You know, and that's now the point where I have to go, right, come on.
I think we've chatted to a few folk who say similar. There's always that initial rise of this is something new and exciting, and then that dip of this is not working out. Yeah. There's so much stuff I need to have lined up properly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Who am I to write more than 30,000 words?
And I don't know about if you find this, but I find 30,000 words in, I suddenly start to get ideas for other novels, and I'm like, that's so much better. That would be so much better. Why can't I go and work on that? And it's just the lure of the new idea really gets to me. So. And
do you plan out in great detail, or, you know, are you, as they say, planner or pantser, I think is the...
I was a pantser for all the Hidden Truths, because I genuinely didn't know what I was doing. And that did not go well. You know, I learned from having to do 9 rounds of edits with my first agent. So now I am a dedicated planner, and I use, not everyone likes this method, but I use Blake Snyder's Save the Cat as my plotting tool. And I'm a big believer in the 3-act structure. So that's what I've used for the subsequent 2.
And has that made it a lot easier to write, those 2 books? Yeah. Just the way he splits it into 3 acts and then 15 what he calls beats, like mini acts, and just having it split into smaller chunks so you can hit a milestone every so often. Does that take away some of the creative kind of flow, or do you find that it actually helps?
I think it helps. I mean, when you're writing a crime fiction novel, you have to have a little bit of a sense of that structure. Yeah. I really don't want to be formulaic, and I hope that if my books become formulaic, then someone will tell me so I can stop doing that. But All the Hidden Truths was incredibly hard to write because it didn't have that structure, you know. And it's not a traditional crime novel, partly because I think when I was writing it, I didn't realise it was a crime novel that I was writing. And now I know that I'm writing crime novels, I sort of lean into the structure because I think readers expect it as well.
Yeah,
it helps me. They want it, so why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I do it, basically?
And with a plan, have you ever come across a bit where you've got your plan written out, but as you're writing it, something in your head, you know, the characters take you off in a different direction or anything like that? Or have you planned it to the extent where you really know almost every scene as to what's happening?
No, there is that creepy thing where the characters seem to have a mind of their own.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know how that happens. Margaret Atwood wrote a book called Negotiating with the Dead, which is her book about writing a book. And she talks about it as kind of like channeling the voices of dead people, which is very, very weird. But I kind of know what she means. There's something really spooky about it. Sometimes your character will be like, no, I'm going to do this. And you hadn't planned for that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
okay,
definitely.
Right, I guess we're going over here then. Like,
it definitely does happen, like when you're right. And actually it can be quite exciting, but it can sort of throw off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scrap all this stuff at once.
If you're going to do that, then what the heck's going to happen?
It's always worse when you're like midway through a draft and you think, oh, now I've got to chuck all this time I've already written out the window and redraft it all.
And do you show your work to anyone? Obviously you didn't so much, it doesn't sound like with All the Hidden Truths, but do you show your work to, you know, trusted friends or anything like that to read it over beforehand?
I don't. And that's a shocking admission, because I tell other people to do that. You know, as a creative writing teacher, I recommend that as a good thing to do, but I actually don't. I'm quite secretive about it. I'll talk to people about it. Like, I spend quite a lot of time bouncing ideas off people, and I'll sort of explain, right, in this scene, Birch has to do this. Like, there was in the third novel, which I've just finished, she needed to find something in a wood. She's in a wood, and you know, it's this huge area of land, and she needs to stumble across something, this vital clue. And it's like, how do I do that without it just being the biggest coincidence in the world? So I was bouncing ideas off people and came up with some really interesting ones. Like, she falls over and she grabs at a plant and like she pulls up the roots, and in the roots there's a dead hand. You know, and, people really like being able to sort of chip in ideas for crime stuff. So I do things like that, but I don't show pages of the novel to people. I'm fortunate to have a really good agent and a really good editor, and so I just kind of go straight to them. And then they tell me all the things I have to fix.
And do you think, having done the creative writing course that you did, I'm sure that was obviously really, really helpful. And is that something that you kind of think, because I've seen this argument online before, people saying you need that kind of thing, and folks saying you don't need that, or you know, what's your view on whether or not is it? I'm sure it's helpful. Is it necessary? You know, should people go out and do courses like that to help them?
It's a tricky one. I mean, you get people who say, oh, it's ridiculous, creative writing can't be taught. And I obviously believe that creative writing can be taught because I teach it. But, you know, it's what I found from the creative writing master's degree that I did was it taught me so much about craft. And it was actually in poetry, but I think a lot of what I learned in that master's degree I have taken into the novels, you know, just things like listening to the rhythm of your sentences and strong verbs and making sure you don't repeat yourself, and, you know, looking out for like pet phrases that we all have that we like to revert to. You know, just the sort of nitty-gritty craft things. It's been really useful for that. But I don't think anybody needs to have one of these things. I think they're extremely costly to get. And so obviously they're just not accessible to a lot of people, a master's degree anyway. And I think you can teach yourself this stuff just by doing it and going to writing groups and talking to other writers. And, you know, you can pick up all the knowledge that you'd get on a master's degree elsewhere. It will just probably take longer because it's not as concentrated. You know.
Okay.
But I certainly don't think they're necessary.
But even things like writing groups, sometimes, you know, people, you know, almost speaking from my own point of view, writing is something that I really enjoy doing, do it on my own. But it's that going along to a group and speaking to people about your writing and stuff suddenly feels very exposed. And, and you know, I'm tend to be more introverted than extrovert. So putting yourself out there can be quite a scary thing, especially when it's something that you really are passionate about. And someone might just
with one line
rip it
could
apart.
just exactly.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I teach this course called Write Like a Girl, which is specifically for women who want to write but who have really busy lives, and it's about finding ways to fit your writing around all your various other commitments. And a lot of the women who come along have small children and things like that. And they always say, it takes a huge amount of effort. I have to get a babysitter. I have to, psych myself up. I have to make sure everything's in place, and then I go along and then I still have to take myself through the door. It is a terrifying thing to do. And I kind of don't know what the answer to that is. I think it's just about finding the right place. Like, I think we're very lucky here in Edinburgh to have places like Golden Hair Books and Lighthouse and Type Wronger, all these little bookshops that hold like very little friendly, intimate groups for that kind of thing. And so you're not going into like a university setting or a big group of people. It's automatically friendly, and you get a cup of tea and stuff.
And I suppose everyone's in the same situation.
Yeah.
They're not out to tear each other apart.
You'd hope not. You'd hope not.
Although I don't know, maybe it happens sometimes. And at the editing stage, so if you send off your manuscript to your agent or editor, and they come back with notes, are you always? Well, actually, it sounded like you weren't, and with All the Hidden Truths, you will push back sometimes if you disagree with some of what they say.
I did that was something that I felt really strongly about the ending of that book, because I wanted, my thought all the way through All the Hidden Truths was it has to reflect real life. Because if I take a subject matter like mass shootings and get at all silly with it or at all fantastical with it, then I've been really, really disrespectful, So it had to be true to life all the way through. And when these things really happen, you never get to know what went through this person's head to make them do this horrendous thing. I think there are still people speculating about Thomas Hamilton and Dunblane and we're many years on now. So I really wanted the ending to leave people with that feeling of, I still don't quite know. I've been given a lot more information, but I still don't quite know exactly why he did this thing. Yeah. And that was just that felt like kind of the central emotional core of the book. So for me, it felt like changing the whole personality of the book to change that. Yeah. But otherwise, I am generally very open to edits. I mean, I read somewhere that DBC Pierre who's won the Booker Prize and all sorts, doesn't do any edits at all, like refuses all edits.
Oh, really?
And when I first get a structural edit, I'm always like, I'm going to be like him this time. I'm just going to send it. I'm not doing it this minute. You can all get lost. But then usually I'll read it again and go, actually, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I think
you're right about that.
So true, yeah.
Oh, I suppose I can do that, yeah, okay.
I think it was Craig Robertson told us about Lee Child, who's always...
That's right.
He apparently says, get 20 notes or something, and he'll say, this is all rubbish, I don't need it. And then a couple of days later, he'll be like, oh, well, I suppose I could do those 3. That's fine. And then a couple of days later, I suppose I could do those ones.
I think it's that psychological thing of, you've spent so long on this work, you hand over someone's like, yeah, it's good, but here's some changes. You think, well, what did you know? I'm the one who's having the time writing it. And it is, and then as you say, time goes by and you think, and then it's almost afterwards you look back and you think, oh, that has made it a lot stronger.
Annoyingly, they were right.
But I think that's right. I think at the end of the day, it's still your book, and it's still the author's. It's that balance between accepting something which you think will make it better and not wanting to compromise on the vision or the message you want to do. Because I think as you see, endings, I always find endings better if it's not neatly wrapped up and there's still that kind of, or you're still thinking about it a few days later, or and any good film or show you watch, when you're still thinking about it 3 to 4 days later, because it's less living on you. I think that is definitely a stronger ending. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's had that effect. I don't know if I have managed to succeed in making people still think about the book.
Oh, I definitely
5 days down the line.
That was the end. Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah.
And obviously the books are set in Edinburgh, where you live. Is that something that you think is important? Is that part of the sort of cliche of write what you know kind of a thing? Because you can bring more to it because you have more knowledge.
I mean, with All the Hidden Truths, when I first started it, I think because I was afraid of mishandling the subject matter, it was actually set in kind of any town, Scotland. Right, and I was very vague about where precisely this was. And that was one of the things that my first agent was really useful for, in that she said, you have to give people more of a frame of reference than this. And then I chose Edinburgh just because I know it so well, and I was able to put in, she said, we want specificity, we want street names, we want, the details. And so I thought, well, I know all of that stuff about Edinburgh. So that's what I'll do. And then it's actually become one of my favourite things about the books is getting to put in, like Birch drives around a lot, and I like putting in what route she takes, for example, just geeky things like that. I really enjoy. Like,
it's always nice when you read stuff.
Bad,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And as folk who know the area, it is nice when you read something you think, I know exactly where that is.
Certainly, if you know the city, I think it takes you much more into the story because you suddenly visualise it.
Yeah, there's a bit in All the Hidden Truths where she's sitting at traffic lights on Seafield, and the number of people who've said, those traffic lights on Seafield, like, I'm so with her, you're so right about that. So,
and how do you know when a book's ready to go to how do you know when you get that point and you say it's now ready to go to the agent, or I can now show it to someone at last, what point
when it's finished, I suppose is difficult, rather than going back and revisiting.
I mean, it's a tricky thing because now I'm on the sort of, it's a little bit of a hamster wheel when you're writing crime fiction, and I'm now on the hamster wheel of deadlines. So it's kind of like the deadline is approaching, it has to be ready, and I don't have time to go, maybe I could just tweak it a little bit. But I think I'm really lucky to have these two very good women in my team who kind of, I can send it to them and go, look, I know that there's a bit in the middle that's a bit flabby or whatever, and I know that it's not, this bit isn't quite right and I haven't quite got it yet, and they will then sort of help, so it's not that it's like I feel it's done and then it goes. It's more like, right, I've got as far as I can on my own and now I need them to read it for me, so it kind of goes from being a lone thing to a collaborative thing.
Okay. And what sort of deadlines have you been given now? You're on I take it when you signed All the Hidden Truths, was it a kind of 2-book deal?
That was a 2-book deal, and then I got a subsequent second 2-book deal, so I'm contracted for 4.
Okay. And is that one per year, essentially? Or
roughly,
is it okay?
yeah.
Which is quite tight for a whole book. Yeah. Not to put pressure on it.
No, it's good though, because everyone, I think a lot of people understand that you work better when you've got a deadline, and I certainly work better when I've got a deadline, so it helps. But All the Hidden Truths took me about 4 years from first word on the page to sending it out to publishers, and then What You Pay For was 8 months. So 8 months of writing and then like 2 months of editing and then out the door it went, so it's a much tighter time frame.
And did you have ideas for the other books when you handed in All the Hidden Truths? Yeah,
not in a large, expansive book-sized sense, but I get little kind of kernels of an idea. Like the kernel of the idea for What You Pay For was from a news item that you might remember. There was a guy who faked his own death in a canoe accident and disappeared and went to live in Panama.
Yeah, for like 7 years, for the insurance stuff. Was that one his wife knew about it?
His wife
the kids.
knew, but his children didn't know. And I was fascinated by the fact that he seemed to have thoroughly disappeared. He'd managed to disappear in this age of like so much surveillance and CCTV and social media and whatnot. And I started thinking, I wonder if you could do that without committing any kind of criminal act. Like, is it possible to completely disappear without doing something against the law? And the answer, I think, is no. But that was the little kernel for What You Pay For. And that became the story of Charlie, who reappears having been missing, presumed dead for 14 years. So it's just like tiny, tiny little ideas or questions that I get, and then it's that snowball down a mountain thing. You just start pushing the snowball and see what sticks, So,
And as with all successful crime novels, the question is there any approach from TV or anything like that for any of the novels that you're allowed to tell us about? You may
not really. I had a TV producer lady take me for a very nice breakfast in January of this year to talk about All the Hidden Truths. But then she never called me back. So I got my hopes up, because obviously that was still quite early in the proceedings. I was like, oh my God, it's the big time. It's going to be on Netflix. And then she's like, you'll hear from me, and I never did hear from her. So, but she may still reappear. You never know.
Exactly. But, well, the prize that we only
exactly.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with how it's gone. Yeah. I know everyone always says, I'm perfectly happy as I am, and I obviously wouldn't be sad if Netflix did come along. but it's done so incredibly well, and people have said such nice things about it. You know, that for me has been the best thing, has been having it reviewed in big newspapers and have people say nice things about it. You know, Marcel Berlin's gave it a really, really nice review, and he was obviously, you know, sadly died recently, but he was such a kind of titan of crime fiction reviewing. So, you know, things like that have been just like all my Christmases come at once. You know? So I'm really pleased with how it's gone.
And you find that with each book you've written, it gets easier each time, and you know, when you get into is it easier to get into the routine, or is it still the same kind of struggles each time, the same points, the same 10,000 words, etc.? Yeah,
there's still the thing of, oh, I've had an idea for another one, and I want to go and do that now. That's still very present. But I think the biggest thing now is the confidence to think, well, I know I can do this because I've done it once, you know, and people have said that I did it okay. Like that makes a big difference to have had someone like Marcel Berlin's go, yes, actually you can write a book, you're okay at this. That removes a lot of the sort of imposter syndrome and the fear and the sort of shame type stuff, you know, all the stuff you're in therapy for. That lifts some of that a bit, and it doesn't, that makes it easier.
Okay.
But there's still the thing of like, is this at all pacey, or is it really boring? You know, and you don't. That's something that I don't find out until readers start to read it.
Okay.
It's like, is it pacey or not? I never know.
Because I thought the opening section to All the Hidden Truths, I thought was really strong, and I thought it was paced very well, because you're kind of not sure what's going on at first, and that all that kind of confusion, and then it starts to clarify what's going on. And I did wonder, was that something that you knew as you were writing it, this is pacing it well, or you planned it that way, or was it was it editing, or was it just luck?
Well, I mean, that's what you aim for. It's like, I hope people are gripped by this, but because you write at a much slower speed than anybody's going to read, you know, you've been working on this scene for a week or 3 weeks or whatever, and it's going incredibly slowly, and it's very tedious for you. So I'm never entirely sure if it reads quickly, you know, or if it reads in a gripping way. So it's always nice when people go, oh yeah, I couldn't put that bit down, and I'm like, thank goodness for that.
It took me 6 months of that.
So that's the kind of wait and see mystery bit that I think that's probably the thing I'm most worried about, is does it flow, does it tick along?
I mean, I suppose, but if you've always got that moment of the agent or editor coming back and helping you with bits that might not work as well. I suppose that's their role.
They're the fresh eyes who come on and say, this bit's dragging, or this bit's going too fast, or they can help you tweak.
I mean, it's the sort of thing that I think, because we have spoken to a couple of people that self-published, and that's almost a stage that is missing, and I suppose that's a big danger in the self-publishing stage, that the first time it is going out there, you know, sometimes they'll get an editor in or something, but it's not had as much consideration sometimes, I suppose, is the difficulty.
No, I mean, I'm completely in awe of people who self-publish. I think it's a very brave thing to do for that very reason, because I feel like I have so many buffers between me and a reader. You know, someone is going to come along and say, because especially when you're writing crime fiction, you're writing about violence, you want someone to say, like, this is a bit gratuitous, or this is distasteful. That's something I worry about, especially with a topic like mass shootings. You want someone to tell you, like, this is going to upset people, which I don't think anyone ever said, fortunately. But had I been, I don't think I could have self-published All the Hidden Truths. I think I would have been too frightened. So,
no, I know what you mean. I think
people are brave.
when you're in them and you're wrapped up in a subject like that, it is difficult to get the distance, isn't it? Knowing, am I playing up to the tropes of this genre, or am I taking it past that point, and am I taking it something too far? And I can get the same effect by dialing it back a little bit, and that is hard to see. I think when you're wrapped up in it all for so long as well. And I mean, things like the conspiracy theory research that I was doing, you get quite desensitized to it. You start thinking, well, anything could be fake. This whole world is a simulation. You know? When you've spent a lot of time sitting on these strange websites. So just things like that. To have but I suppose most folk aren't that immersed.
And do you ever get writer's block? And if so, how do you overcome it?
I kind of don't. I feel like writer's block is a bit of an unhelpful term, and I think it can sometimes be used as a bit of a cop-out. You know, people say, oh, I've got writer's block, I'm done. I can't, you know, I'm done for the next 6 months. I mean, I was listening to your episode with M.R. Carey, and you said, I have good days and bad days. And I think that's how it is. You know, some days it's a mystery as to why, but I will just sit in front of the laptop and there's just nothing there, you know. And I can be 60,000 words in. I know exactly what needs to happen next. I know the scene that I need to write, and it just isn't there.
Yeah.
And it's days like that where you just have to, like, make yourself a cup of tea and you know, do something else until it is there. But then the next day you can be absolutely fine. Yeah. And I think the problem with the idea of writer's block is someone has a day like that and then they go, oh, right, I clearly have writer's block, therefore I will take the next 3 months off. Yeah. That's the danger, because the next day you can, like, get into flow and have a fantastic day. So
because it is so true. Sometimes it does just click, and sometimes you think it's just crap.
Another thing some people have said to us is just almost just write down shorthand for what is meant to happen here, and try and move on to the next bit and see if then you can go back to it almost. You know, I think the key thing is keep writing.
Yeah, don't stop it just because you're having a bad day.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's easier said than done. I do understand why people stall and then can't get going again.
Yeah, and it's also there's that kind of guilt of, if you're not writing every day, you're not a real writer and stuff. And I think it's, especially, you know, everyone's got lives and jobs, etc., and it's difficult enough to try and find the time. When you do find that time, if it's not clicking, it can easily feel like I'm just rubbish at this and I'll just give up. So
it is, certainly I'm guilty sometimes of sitting there for an hour and a half or something and going, it's not going to happen. Yeah. I'll watch something on Netflix. That'll inspire me.
7 hours later.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's but exactly. There's also so much stuff on our time now, and it's you're trying to squeeze it in. It is difficult, and I think you have to give yourself a break sometimes.
And again, I talk a lot to women in particular, but this applies to men, to dads as well. There are some people who are like, right, I've got 20 minutes while the baby is napping. Yeah. This is my writing time. And so that must be doubly frustrating when nothing comes and you're like, that's the only window I have. But, you know, I think what I tend to say to those people as well, if it takes you 4 years to write your novel, that's fine. It took me 4 years to write my novel. If it takes you 10 years, it's fine. Just keep chipping away at it, basically. And that's not what people want to hear, because we've got this narrative of sort of the overnight success and, like, Zadie Smith wrote White Teeth when she was still an undergrad and all this kind of thing. But if you can, you have to try and put that aside and just be like, this is my thing. Doesn't matter how other people have done their thing, you know.
I'm not writing it so I can become an overnight success. I'm writing it because I enjoy writing.
Yeah. And I mean, the overnight success narrative is sort of fake anyway.
Yeah. Yes, that's probably true.
Because, I mean, I mentioned Helen Sedgwick earlier. I think she's a really interesting example. Like, her, in inverted commas, debut novel, The Comet Seekers, she'd written 3 books before that never got published for one reason or another. And yet that was presented as like, brand new writer, freshly minted. And yet she'd been writing for like 10 years before that. So, and I think that's true of a lot of us. You know, I was a poet for 10 years before I wrote a novel. And so it's not even really true, that overnight success thing. But it is really pervasive. Yeah. So
that's what everyone hears, and and the massive amounts of money and fame that comes with it and stuff, and it's not really.
Well, that's it. Even if you get published, you get an agent, you get published, it can still...
It's still go nowhere after that.
Go nowhere, but you have to still love the writing.
Exactly.
That's ultimately what it comes back to.
Yeah. And what sort of stuff do you like to read yourself?
All sorts of things. I'm on a real non-fiction thing at the moment, and I really like true crime. So I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts and I read true crime books. And I'm really excited. I'm currently rereading this book that's about the Salem witch trials, because I've just been on holiday to Boston. And it's written like a crime novel. It's kind of like, let's get to the bottom of why Salem happened and how this came about. But I'm like racing through it because I really want to read this book called The Five. I can't remember the name of the author, but it's about the 5 victims of Jack the Ripper.
Oh, right. Okay.
And it's been quite a controversial book because the author has posited that they were not all sex workers, as was previously assumed. And so that massively potentially changes what Jack the Ripper's motive was, if they didn't all fit neatly into the same category.
Yeah.
So I'm really into that kind of thing. But also I read a lot of just fiction of all stripes. Like, it was really, again, listening to your M.R. Carey episode, it was really nice to hear him talk about The Girl with All the Gifts, which is one of my favourite books ever.
Yeah.
I really like zombie fiction. I'm really interested in zombie stories and why we like zombies so much.
Yeah.
Why are we so interested in them? So yeah, I kind of read all sorts.
Cool.
And generally, if someone says to me like, "Oh, I've read this thing and it's really weird," that's always an immediate like appeal for me.
Yeah.
I just read a novel called The Pisces, which is about a woman who has a relationship with a merman.
Right.
And it's so weird, but it was really, really good. So I really like just weird books. Basically.
Cool. Yeah.
Fair
enough.
Weird and dark and creepy. Yeah.
And would you like to write something other than crime at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I've got, I think all the ideas that I have are genre of some kind, but I've got lots of ideas for other stuff. I would like to write a zombie book. I've got an idea for a Zombies in Edinburgh book. And that routinely is the one that comes up, because I think that would just be fun.
Yeah.
You know? It would just be good, clean fun. And whenever I'm like 60,000 words deep in something, it's the thing that pops up.
Yeah.
Why are you not writing
could
this?
just be writing about zombies right now. That would be so much more fun than this.
And is it hard? I mean, I take it with the contract you've got, do agents or do publishers' contracts tend to be, we want 2 novels like this one, keep writing what the books you've done in the past, or do folk tend to be pushed on a certain path?
I mean, I can't kind of speak for anybody else, but my current contract says that it will be 2 D.I. Helen Birch books.
Right. Okay.
So, and I mean, I'm sure that my agent would be open to me going, right, D.I. Helen Birch fights zombies. But I don't know if my editor would necessarily go for that. But I mean, they're both great. They're really, you know, I feel like I'm very lucky in that I can sit down and chat to them about anything. And, you know, if I wanted to do a zombie book and it was a case of, right, I have to get this written for some reason before I can do the 4th Helen Birch book. It's just, I have to get it out of my head or something.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Kath, is not the case. It's fine. I'm sure she would be willing to sit down and talk to me about it. You know, like, they're both very straight-talking, open-minded people, which is what you want from your folk. If you end up with someone that you can't talk to about your ideas, then you've got the wrong team. You know. So.
Yeah.
And so what's next? You've got the D.I. Birch. So the third one, when's that out? Is that
so
later next year? Sorry.
Yeah, we've slightly changed the release date because All the Hidden Truths and What You Pay For came out in August. But obviously, releasing a book in August in Edinburgh is not the best idea.
There's a lot of books in August in Edinburgh.
It gets a bit lost in the fringe and stuff. So we've decided that the third one, which is going to be called Cover Your Tracks, is going to come out in February 2021. Right. So I have finished it. It's kind of, I wrote it as if it were on schedule to come out in August. But then I get a bit of a rest, basically. So it's not out till next February, which is...
So you've got plenty of time for that zombie
nice.
book.
So that's what I'm thinking, It's like cheekily just have a bash at this zombie book in between. But we'll see. And then, so the 4th one will follow that trajectory. Then it will be February 2022.
Right, okay.
So, yeah.
And have you got an idea for that, or how do you come up with your ideas? Is it hard to do so for crime novels when you're, thinking of a new crime or a new way to explore a crime?
Well, I think I absorb so much true crime stuff that I'm kind of always in the sort of crucible of thinking about that kind of thing. And what's kind of frightening and amazing about human beings is if you can think of any criminal act, we've already done it. There's all sorts of weird and wonderful things that people do and have done. So the material is there. The 4th one, I actually had the idea for. I wondered about writing the 4th one as the second one, but then it's another kind of big crime like All the Hidden Truths. And I thought it would just be too much. So What You Pay For is a bit of a quieter book in many ways, the second one. And then I got another, the lure of the new idea, I got another idea for the third one. And so that idea that is now the 4th one got sort of pushed further back. I know I'm being really cryptic, but I haven't really talked about it that much, so I don't know if I can tell.
No, of course not.
But yeah, I've got quite a clear idea of it in my head.
Cool.
Like what I really need before I can start writing is I need to know the structure of like the time of the novel. So before I started What You Pay For, I was really struggling to sort of see it as a whole thing. And then one day I suddenly realised it's a week, it's 7 days long. And then once I had the 7 days, it was like, oh, right, now I can start. I understand the shape of
Everything
it.
kind of falls into place a little bit, yeah.
And the fourth one is going to take place over 24 hours, which I have always wanted to do. So I'm really excited about getting started on it.
Cool. Awesome.
Last film you saw?
I'm like deep into the West Wing at the moment.
Oh, right.
I'm a massive West Wing fan, and I watch it probably every year at about this time of year. So I've just restarted the West Wing, and so that's all that's on my TV.
How far are you now?
I'm just getting to the end of season 1.
Okay, cool. Early on.
Yeah, but I'm already like back in the world.
Yeah,
I just
it's brilliant.
love it. I've seen it about 50 times, and I haven't been to the cinema in ages. I can't think what the last thing I saw at the cinema was. I couldn't tell you.
No.
It's been a long time. Yeah, I'm just in West Wing world, basically.
Well, fair enough. Also answers our third question, which is the last show you watched on TV.
Oh, right. Sorry.
No, that's fine. And then the last thing is a sort of either or, so just whatever pops into your head. Well, TV or cinema, easy one.
It's TV, yeah.
Line of Duty or Bodyguard?
You see, I haven't seen The Bodyguard.
Oh, okay.
And it's not The Bodyguard because that's the movie, isn't it? I have seen that and it's not great. No, I haven't seen Bodyguard yet.
Okay.
It's on the list, but Line of Duty is amazing.
Yes, it's very,
really
very
good.
Very compelling viewing, isn't
Yes.
A real book or an e-book?
Always a real book. I've never had a Kindle or an e-reader or anything.
it? Okay.
So whenever I go on holiday, I'm that person with like 5 novels under my arm on the place. Yeah. But I can't quit real books.
Fair enough. It's amazing how many authors pick the real book. It's actually pretty few.
But like I mean, it's a bit of a cheap question because I quite like both of them. Like I like to have real books, but yeah, for holidays and stuff.
Real books are great on the shelf. I love a shelf. I probably just buy the book twice. Just buy it on the Kindle to read on holiday, and then an untouched version on your shelf. And that would be perfect.
Well, you see, you probably hate me because I'm like a book destroyer. Like I bend
Marco.
the spines
You actually give Marco
hold the corners.
Palpitations. I hold books like this. My wife's always like, "Has this been read even?"
I like them to look.
I like to crack the spine just so I know where I am.
Yes.
Well, I won't ever get a book from Marco to read now.
Exactly.
Fancy restaurant or a takeaway?
I think fancy restaurant.
Nice.
And the last one, a Scottish crime, Laidlaw or Rebus?
That's so mean. I think Rebus because I found Rebus first, and I feel like Rebus is like the go-to, isn't he? Everyone loves Rebus, so I think Rebus.
Okay.
No, fair enough.
Sorry.
No.
I feel bad choosing.
There's no wrong answers.
I think that's 2-0 to Rebus against Laidlaw.
In our extremely scientific study.
Exactly. I think it's drawing from that massive pool of 2 Scottish crime writers that we've spoken to recently. They both picked Rebus over Laidlaw.
Can I tell you an interesting secret about myself, Marco?
Yes, it's only me you're telling. Don't worry about the recording equipment.
I have never read a Rebus book.
Never?
Never in my entire life. Never have I ever.
And
I would drink if I had a drink.
Have you
if that's the rules of the game.
Have you seen the TV show?
No. I saw it being filmed,
but
randomly.
That didn't make you want to read the books either.
If anything, it put me off it. Who was it? Who was the actor who played him? John Hannah. Was that Rebus?
No.
What was I watching being filmed? Was it? Yeah, it was John Hannah, was it not?
No, it was.
Well, John
maybe John Hannah did.
I'm sure he must. I'm sure he
well.
did. We're currently looking up. This is exciting. This is live.
Ken Stott.
No, but John Hannah played him as well.
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay.
Oh, he ruined it for me.
John
I watched him climbing into a car and I was like, I'm done, I'm out.
Oh well.
Sorry.
I think you've just blown our chance of getting an interview with Ian Rankin.
I'll read them all before he comes on, don't worry.
Excellent. Well, I thought that was a really good chat with Claire. And it was interesting really to hear how all the hidden truths wasn't this massive success. You know, the idea of the overnight
Yeah.
success
Yeah.
is really a lie, I suppose.
Yeah, it's very, very rare. For
It wasn't this massive success to begin with, but she had polished that first 10,000 words, and that really was the way that it became successful.
Yeah, and also she did that brave thing, which is having an agent and then saying goodbye to that agent and finding a new one. When, you know, a lot of us who are trying to get agents, it's a long process. You write to so many people. To then throw that away and jump in with someone new, or to try and find someone new, it's not easy to do.
Yeah, it must have been, as you say, it was a really brave step
Yeah,
to take. But
it was the right one, though.
It was the right one, and the success of the book shows that she was right to stick to her guns in the way that she wanted the book to end, which I think is, like she says, it is that sort of book that doesn't give you a happy resolution. It doesn't tie everything
and it's
up.
all the better for it.
No, I think that's right. I think a lot of good crime fiction, especially if it leaves you feeling slightly uneasy or unsure,
exactly,
I think that's a good way to leave
And
it.
it's the balance between writing an ending that you know as the author is the best, or you feel is the best one, and having to stick to your guns on that and say, no, I'm going to go against your advice and I'm going to leave you to go to something else. And having the conviction to stick to that.
I mean, it's not something that couldn't have been an easy decision, but as we say, it was the right one. So thanks again so much to Claire for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate her taking the time to come and meet with us to record that. And we also appreciate her giving us a signed copy of What You Pay For, which is, as we discussed there, the second book in the D.I. Birch series. Claire has donated that signed copy to us to give away as a prize in a competition, which
I thought it was for me.
well,
We're giving it away.
I was going to say you can enter. I mean, enter if you want. I'm not sure you'll win, but so if you want to win that signed copy, just look at our social media accounts. There's instructions on there for how to win it. This is just a short competition. It's only going to run until next Thursday.
Yep.
Because we'll announce the winner on next week's podcast. And before I tell you who's on next week's podcast,
Very exciting.
which is very exciting news, you can also enter the competition by rating and leaving a review for us on Apple Podcasts. I understand there has been some difficulty in leaving reviews. A few people have been in touch saying that they've rated us, but they can't leave a review because it won't let them use a username.
That's an Apple problem.
That is. From looking online, it looks like it's just because there were so many usernames already taken. So just add a few numbers to the end of whatever username you want, and it will probably let you leave that review. If you do that, just drop us an email to let you know that you've done that. And as always, if you can rate and review us, especially on Apple Podcasts, it really helps us shoot up the charts, which makes a big difference to us being able to record this and get all these great authors and writers on the podcast.
It really is incredibly important. And it's really, as Marco says, the Apple Podcast chart is the big one really to climb up. And if we're able to climb up that consistently, that will help us do more amazing podcasts for you guys to listen to.
Yeah. But speaking of big authors, who's on next week, Tarek?
Next week, we have a very big author, someone exciting to both of us, Mr. Richard Morgan, or Richard K. Morgan, if you are in the US of A.
Yes.
I believe he's known as.
Richard is the author of sci-fi novels such as Altered Carbon.
Yeah, it's probably what he's best known for, I think.
Which last year was turned into what I thought was a great series on Netflix. It's very I suppose the term is hard sci-fi.
Yeah. Blade Runner-y.
Yeah.
Noir. Yeah,
very
exactly,
much noir.
Yeah.
There's no good guys and bad guys as such.
Everyone's a bad guy.
Everyone. Shades of grey, I think is maybe the way to say it. But he's also written a successful fantasy series as well.
Yes.
He's written comics. He's written video games. We had a great chat with Richard, and also a long chat with Richard. It was our longest podcast to date. So we are still currently deciding whether to release it as one mammoth episode.
Marco's trying to work out whether
or divide it into two.
He can bear the thought of editing two separate episodes of the podcast.
So there will certainly be at least one episode with Richard out next Friday, so highly recommend tuning in for that one. That one will be the last in the present series. We'll announce the winner of the Claire Askew competition and the Andy McNabb competition.
A lot of stuff happening
next week. So if you want to enter that competition, get on it quickly, and we'll see you next week.
See you then.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realise it's not just the story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page one.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please leave a comment down below, hit that thumbs up button, and be sure to hit that subscribe button as well so you never miss an episode like these ones below.
And if you want to get in touch, you can always drop us a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is at UKPage1, as evidenced here, and our other social media channels are available.
Otherwise, we hope to see you next episode.
See you later.